busy and lazy, two slightly different things. And I'm not calling you lazy, but you did use the word slack. Okay, so you kind of called yourself out a little bit on this one, all right? What is up, people? Welcome to the 100K Q&A. We have 33 questions to go through. We're going to start from the bottom to the top. Question number 33. Let's effing go. Am I allowed to swear this early? Whatever. From Protein Man. What is up, my dude? What do you think that rings do better than weights? Now, first of all, I think that they make non-gym training go from, wow, this sucks, what am I doing, I just want to get back to the gym, to, hey, I'm actually excited about this. This is pretty good. I also think they're pretty good for, the chesticles, ring flies, ring turned out push-ups, dips. They tend to be a lot more chest dominant compared to triceps dominant because they move in an arc. You get a great range of motion. You can do mechanical drop sets. So you start with like a fly, then you get a little bit more push-up-y as you go. They incentivize leanness as well because you're moving your own body weight. They do work your core because often you're in a plank position during the set. So I found that I actually got increased abdominal development just from a few weeks of ring training. And I think they're overall an excellent tool. I used them for a few weeks and I love them so much that I decided to write a whole book about them. All right, question number 32 from Consensual Strength. How do you find a balance between enough volume for hypertrophy and to hit every muscle group twice a week, but not so much volume that it would hinder recovery and progress? So in a word, experimentation. That is what I preach on this channel repeatedly. You have to experiment. You have to treat your training like an experiment. You have to be willing to try new things. You have to be willing to scale things up, dial things back, and see what causes the best progress for you. This is going to be super individual. I get questions all the time from people who say, hey, what do you think about this? Or is this too much volume? More often than not, you are the only person who can answer that. Maybe a coach if he or she has been working with you for a long period of time, but generally speaking, personal accountability and experimentation are the keys. Question number 31, what is your advice to people stuck in novice purgatory? For instance, people who have made all of their noob gains, but nothing more, and who fail to firmly plant their feet in that intermediate stage. My main advice would be find out what is going wrong. Is it inconsistency? That is a surprising number of people who they're not consistent in the gym and they're wondering, like, oh, why am I not getting results? Well, it's because you took a week off here, 2 weeks off here, a week off here, and you're only really working out 2/3 of the year or perhaps even less. So that is a big concern. Could be sleep, could be not eating enough, occasionally insufficient protein, but that's not most of the case. Could be bad technique. If you're doing your dumbbell bench presses and it's just out here and it's tiny little bit of the range of motion, I wouldn't expect to get great chest development. It is occasionally insufficient volume, but I would say proximity to failure is going to be a bigger one. And it could be a huge variety of things. It might even be as simple as micronutrients, right? So it could be any number of things. And a lot of people plateau because these gains past that beginner stage are a little bit more difficult to get. Question 30, do you have any tips on getting a good mind-muscle connection overall? Not just during a lift. I mainly want to be able to pose better and activate certain muscle groups like pecs, lats, etc. So this is just my honest answer. It's how I feel. Often getting a muscle bigger will allow you to activate it better, right? Like when you see all these IFBB pros, like they do one set of chest and they're like, oh man, like everything is on fire. Well, a lot of that is because they're so developed that it's easy to have a connection, right? And this is a little bit of a chicken egg, cart before the horse kind of situation, right? Like if you have small rear delts, how do you connect with your rear delts? And then how do you grow your rear delts to get them bigger, to connect with them? So I think sometimes isometric holds can help. Like if you're having trouble feeling your rear delts, use very light weights and do skiers and really focus on just that end range of motion contraction. That can help. For lats, often it's the traps taking over or the rear delts taking over. So find some kind of movement that can allow you to isolate that muscle group as much as possible, and then use very lightweight, very controlled movement. And this is where, if a muscle group is lagging or you're having trouble, mind muscle connecting with it, which by the way I think is overrated overall, you might need to lighten the weight a lot until you can actually activate those areas correctly during that big movement. But again, I would not make that the main focus of your training. And if you are spending a lot of time, I gotta activate my chest, this particular fiber with this movement, maybe as a pre-activation, but if you're spending too much time on that, I don't expect good results. A lot of the time it's just the basic training principles, basic progressive overload, good programming, sleep, sunlight, that kind of stuff. All right, question number 29. Thanks, Geoff, for everything. You're a pleasure to learn from. Thank you for the support. How do you go about making progress on a muscle group despite not being built for a lift? Like if you tend to, good morning, a squat. So a few things here. First, you don't have to do any particular movement. Okay, so if you've tried squats for a long period of time, they're just not working for you. There's nothing wrong with tossing out a barbell back squat. Okay, you can do a front squat, you can do leg press, you can do hack squat, Smith machine hack squat, lots of other options that can get you the results that you want. Second, if you're not built for a lift, you might need to force yourself to use submaximal loads and do it in such a way that activates the area that you want to activate. For example, I also have long femurs, and my instinct is to good morning a squat. It's for the hips to shift back, it's for the torso to incline, and use mostly hips, a little bit of hamstrings, lower back, etc. But the way I actually squat is with pushing the knees forward, it's with staying as upright as possible, which is still not fully upright because, again, if you have long femur, torso tends to incline no matter what, but my knees are way over the toes, right, when I'm doing a squat. And then as I stand up, I push them forward. This gets me more rectus femoris development, more quad development as a whole, and I can't move as much weight, but I'm not a power lifter. I could move significantly more weight, 20, 30, maybe even 40% more weight, with a low bar position, with the hips shifting back, but that's not my goal. Finally, if you're not built for a lift, you probably won't be as strong on it anyways, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So if you're like, I have long arms in the bench press, that means I can't get a lot out of the bench press. No, it means that actually you're putting more tension on the chest for a given load than someone with shorter arms. So don't think that, I'm not leveraged for the lift, therefore I can't get anything out of the lift. If you have short arms in the deadlift, that's more range of motion, right? So if anything, you're going to be getting more out of less weight, which is often a good thing. 28 is killing your gains. Yeah, quite possibly. I see a lot of, especially beginners, they go into the gym and they're just like, what do I do? Or like, if I do anything at all, I'm gonna kill my gains. I can't internally rotate. I can't let the knees go in. I can't round my back. I can't do anything. And so, yeah, every time you put out a killing your gains video, you're gonna be killing someone's gains because a lot of people buy this bullshit. And there are some things that can kill your gains, but usually that's not what people making killing your gains videos are actually talking about. All right, next question. Hey, Geoff, I'm going through a bulk right now. Nice decision. Gaining strength on all my lifts, including 8 to 15 rep isolation stuff. I feel like I'm getting bigger, but I'm barely gaining any weight. Eat more just to gain more weight, or keep going the way I am? So it sounds like you are most likely recomping. So you're getting stronger, you're staying the same weight, you feel bigger. Yeah, you're recomping most likely, and I would say this is a great situation. However, keep in mind you're definitely not going to be able to do this forever. Okay, so at a certain point, this whole exchanging fat for muscle thing, your body's going to be like, yeah, we actually don't have that much fat left, so, screw you, this is going to stop. And that could be 14% body fat, that could be 18% body fat, that could be 12% body fat, it could be 22% body fat. It's going to be different for every person. Ladies add 9 to 10% to those numbers. So keep in mind you can't do this forever, but it sounds like you're in a good situation, and so I wouldn't change anything. But if progress seems to stall a little bit, then you will probably have to add in calories. Next question, I'll put on the screen, but I'll try to summarize it because it's a little bit long. Someone who wasted their bulk, gaining 10 to 20 pounds, but not increasing their lifts or seeming to gain muscle definition or any kind of size, I would take this as a big learning opportunity and really reassess your training. If you're gaining a significant amount of weight, but you're not increasing your lifts, something has gone very wrong in your training. It's not even necessarily the fault of the diet. In fact, I would kind of just ignore diet in this case. So don't worry about cutting or bulking or recomping. Something's wrong with your training. And you got to find out what it is. Could be progressive overload, could be effort, could be the structure, could be consistency, could be a lot of things. But this is absolutely a training issue more than a diet issue. You're clearly eating enough. And so if things are not going well in the gym, don't look at what's going on outside of the gym. Look at what is going on in the gym. Could be sleep as well, could be stress, but typically this is a training issue. All right, next question. How many inches can a beginner or intermediate lifter gain across various muscle groups like the chest, arms, legs, etc. in 1 year of training? Also, what would you call a good forearm, calf, and neck measurement? All right, so I would say for the chest, 5 inches in your first year of training is doable. I don't know how much I put on because I didn't measure until 2019, so after several years of lifting. Arms, I would say an average arm, I think for the general population, is around 13 inches. So I could see someone going from like 12 inches and kind of undersized to maybe 15. I would say that's doable. Not common, but definitely plausible. And then legs, I could see someone putting on 3-4 inches, maybe even 5 if they started pretty skinny. Especially if someone has like premium genetics, you can put on a lot of muscle in a year if you're willing to eat and put in the work and be consistent, etc., get in good sleep, whatever. You know, if you really devote yourself to this, upwards of 20 pounds of muscle in your first year of training is absolutely doable. It'll probably be accompanied by fat, but that is absolutely plausible. So I would say 5-ish inches for chest is possible. But if you put on 3 or 4 inches, that's still noticeable, especially if they're, you know, pretty lean gains. As for the forearms, calf and neck measurements, I would say neck, anything above 16 is good. Calves, again, anything above 16 are good. Same for arms. As for forearms, it depends how you measure it, right? So I measure it with a straight wrist, straight arm, and then I measure, you know, around here. And mine are like 13. Whereas if I measure flexed, I get like 14. And if I measure flex at the wrist and the elbow, I'll get upwards of 15, maybe even closer to 16. So when I hear someone with a very big forearm measurement, my first thought is like, okay, well, how did they measure it, right? Because, you know, I have pretty decent forearms, and mine are 13 here. And so when I see someone with like okay forearms, and they're like, yeah, I have 15-inch forearms, I really am curious about how they went about that measurement. So this is one muscle group where it's a little bit inconsistent in terms of the numbers. So make sure you are actually measuring it at least consistently from month to month to month so that you're not cheating the system. If you measure like this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, you might be making gains on paper, but not actually in reality. All right, next question. With your channel getting more and more popular, do you think your content will ever change significantly? So maybe, but probably not. You know, I might do upgrades in terms of like the sound or in terms of like production value. But the thing is, once you improve that, you can't go back, right? So if I, you know, had some super special setup and then like we moved apartments again or something and, you know, it changed, you know, that would be kind of difficult. And so, you know, if I change things, I'm not really in a rush to do that. And I think a lot of people ask me how to get started in YouTube, and they're like, oh, I bought this $1,000 camera and this $500 setup and this and this and this. You don't necessarily need that. Like, that's not what people actually care about in a lot of cases. And so I think it's probably not the most important focus. All right, next one, 23. How do you know what muscle group is the most dominant in a certain lift? For example, if your triceps are doing most of the work on bench press, and if that's the case, would it be better to add in something like chest flyers to compensate for the work that your chest didn't do? So sometimes you can see it. I can look at a client and I can tell by the way they're moving what muscle is doing the work. Often you can feel it as well. If this is where soreness is actually quite useful, so not just feeling it during the movement or just after, but what gets sore later. I mean, if your triceps get sore from a bench press, they're probably going to be doing a pretty good amount of the work. And if your chest never gets sore, well, that's a sign that it's probably not doing that much. So I would say let those be your guide. You can also perhaps just look at someone. You look at someone squatting and you can tell, like, maybe the quads aren't doing that much. Or you look at someone and they have just massive tree trunk quads, just huge thighs. And then you look at them squat and you're like, well, that's why, right? They're staying very upright. They're like doing a flat style of squat. And they have big quads because of how they squat. And how they squat is because they have big quads. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of situation there too. What are your thoughts on strength-based programs? Do you feel that a hypertrophy-focused lifter should know about them just conceptually, or can one do without delving into them? I think you'd be fine not knowing about them. I know about them, but just because I'm in the industry and I'm a naturally curious person about fitness. But I think the concepts are not particularly useful and can actually lead you astray in a lot of cases. So you start to optimize things for strength, and then it is pretty much by definition worse than just a pure hypertrophy program. That being said, if you've been doing like fluff and pump Instagram workouts, a strength-based program might actually be better than that. And so certainly you could do a lot worse than some common popular strength-based programs. Is the behind the neck press or Smith machine variation a better exercise for hypertrophy than the standard OHP, assuming you can do it safely because of the increased activation of the side and rear delts and decreased stability demands? I think it very well might be better for some people. It's going to be individual. You should experiment. The word activation is kind of a buzzword in my opinion. So just because you have increased EMG activation, that would not be a primary decider for me if I should do a movement or not do it, particularly because this is going to be on other people unless you're like strapping yourself to an EMG, putting the pads on you, whatever. So I would say it might be better, but I wouldn't use an EMG study to make that decision. All right, next one. If you put on a lot of fat but not that much muscle during a bulk, is it because of your food or your training? Thanks. No problem. So it might be too much food. If you expect to put on like 10 pounds of muscle in 2 months or something as an intermediate, it's just not going to happen. And if you put on that much weight, a lot of it's going to be fat, right? So sometimes it's just bulking a little bit too aggressively. It might also be training. If your training sucks and you're bulking and you're putting on weight, if your training sucks, a lot of that is going to be fat, no matter what. So it could be either or both, but it's certainly one of them. Also, it's worth noting that often people expect too much muscle in terms of percentage. I would be thrilled with 50% muscle and 50% fat. Realistically, if I'm going through a full bulk from like 12% to 20% body fat, it might be like 30 or 40% muscle, or perhaps even less, right? That's just the reality of the situation. And so if someone is expecting like 70 or 80% muscle, it's probably not going to happen. All right, question 19. Does the bulking and cutting cycle not work as well for some people? I've noticed that my progression on my bulk of about a 300 calorie surplus hasn't yielded any significant increase in progression compared to about a 30 calorie surplus. Should I stick with the bulk or would main gaining be better? Now, first of all, you don't know if you're in a 30 calorie surplus. That might be 0. That might be 100. So it's just absolutely impossible in a practical way to actually have a 30 calorie surplus. You just don't know. So I think that's worth noting. you probably, if you don't notice any difference in progression, you're not going to be getting any more muscle, most likely. Okay, so I would stick with the 30, and I would also look at your training. I mean, if you're able to make progress, great. Also, keep in mind it's not a 0 or 1 kind of situation. You can have, a 200 calorie surplus, or a 100, or 150. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you don't need to go right from 30 to 300. All right, next one. How much of a difference is there between programming for novices, intermediates, and advanced athletes? Also, what are your thoughts on nucleus overload? There are pretty big differences in terms of exercise selection, variability. Progression is going to be a big one, just the rate that you can make progress. Outside of the gym, how big of a surplus you can and should run. Overuse issues, injury issues, technique, how well the person knows themselves, mentality, etc. Just upstairs, a novice is going to be different from an intermediate, who is going to be different from someone who is advanced. So there are very significant differences, and anyone who's like, starting strength, advanced hypertrophy trainees. No, okay, there are sizable differences, and there's going to be so much more individualization as you become advanced. I don't know anyone who's truly advanced who doesn't know themselves very well and can't talk about training and what works for them on an individual level for a long period of time. So you're going to have to know yourself and get to know yourself quite a bit over your journey. As for nucleus overload, I don't see it being a game changer. I need to do an updated video on it. I think, maybe there might be something there, at least in terms of blood flow, or maybe helping with injuries, etc. But if you're not getting big, I would not say that nucleus overload is going to be the thing that changes everything. All right, next question from someone who is still skinny fat. Granted, I did the whole main gaining bullshit my first year, but after that, I can't seem to put on favorable weight to look athletic. Do you want to look athletic or aesthetic? Because those are two slightly different things. So I would say, again, this probably goes back to training. If you main gained and didn't see results, it might be diet, but again, it goes back to training, and that could be any number of things. So this is tough to say. I would say get your training in order, and even though strength isn't necessarily size, just from looking at, I've worked with almost 1,000 people, it might be over 1,000 people at this point, but the people who are the strongest have the most muscle, and the people who are skinny fat or are skinny tend to be quite weak. So, just focus on getting stronger in the sort of more moderate rep range. All right, next one. Do you think that heavy presses, bench, OHP train the triceps more than what heavy pulls, pull-ups, rows, train the biceps? Yes, I actually do think that. I saw some data on that once, where might actually be EMG, which I just shat on. But I do think that is the case. And typically, if you're trying to do correct technique for rows and for pulls, when you're pulling with the back, you're trying to move more in an arc, okay, which naturally takes the biceps out of it. Whereas with pushing or with pressing movements, you are with rings, which is why they're better for chest than triceps, but for a barbell, you're usually not moving in that same arcing type of motion. So I would agree with this, and you'll probably find that you need more biceps isolation than triceps for that reason. All right, I got 2 questions. What do you think about the exercise tier list of natural hypertrophy? Overall, pretty good. He did my incline dumbbell curls dirty, though. Gotta disagree with that. For me, that's my number one biceps movement. So nope. That's a S tier movement for me. Overall, I agree. Occasionally, there would be a movement or two that I would shift around like one tier. But apart from the incline dumbbell curls, there's nothing where he ranks it way, way differently than I would. So overall, really, really good. The next question, why do you live in China? So I just got really drunk one day, and I just woke up here, and I was like, seems as good a place as any. I might as well stay here, and I've been here 11 years ever since. Next one from Natty Like YouTube. What's up, dude? Congrats on 100K, bro. Thank you. And thank you for all the quality content you put out. No problem. My question, who is your favorite bodybuilder of all time? Or give us a top 3 if you can't decide on just one. So I would say, in terms of like who changed the sport the most, gotta go with Arnold. But he's kind of a dick. He's kind of a dick. He's a little bit of an asshole a lot of the time. So there's that. In terms of like personality and you know, grit, determination, I would say Dorian Yates. And I know those are two enhanced lifters, a big no-no for a natural in the natural community. But you know, I think you can selectively take inspiration, not from the physiques necessarily, but you know, from the personalities. In terms of physique, Steve Reeves, Reg Park are big ones. A lot of the old school guys, and man, it's wild being like even semi-close to some of these physiques. And I think they are good aspirations for natural lifters, where we can be sure that they are natural. And I look up to a lot of those guys. And thank you for the content that you put out. I think it's important to show people what is naturally achievable, and that you absolutely do not need the roids, the juice, in order to make progress and develop a fantastic physique. All right, next question on the triceps overhead extensions, on using a slight push press with leg drive to overload the eccentric. Do you think this could be used as a main heavy overloading movement for the triceps? I don't like it. I've tried it a little bit. I don't like it. It's because when you're leaning away and you use momentum, the momentum is controlled and it's gradual, and you can keep using momentum, but only just enough to complete the rep. Okay, so you start the rep, you hit the sticking point, and you can't get it, and you can sort of like float forward in order to finish the rep. So you can choose when to use it, right? If you don't need it, you don't need to float forward. You can just do reps until you get a slow one or a grindy one you're about to fail, and then you can sort of boost through it.
Use the boost to get through!
It's nice. But with a push press, you have to use it at the start. So you have to try to predict, am I going to fail this rep? And then you have to use just enough in advance, which is super tough to do. That takes a ton of practice. Plus, you have to use that momentum from the bottom position. So with the floating, you can do the rep, hit the sticking point, you know you're going to fail, then you can use the momentum. So you're using momentum not from that fully stretched position, although you can, I guess, if you want to. With the push press, you have to like do that, you know, leg drive from the bottom position, and I don't really like putting a ton of stress in this bottom position. I mean, you can, but I don't really see the point in this. And if you're doing the standing variation, I would just use it as the strict variation and then use the leaning away one with the one where you can really overload. So, plus a push press is necessarily sharp, right? You can't really like ease into it. You have to be explosive to a certain extent. Like, you cannot jump not explosively. Like, try to jump slowly. It's impossible. So I would say this is not proper. It's not a good thing to do, and I don't advise it. Next question, creatine question. Does creatine solubility affect how much is absorbed / its effectiveness? Is Real Science Athletics creatine monohydrate supposed to be very soluble, more effective gram for gram than my protein creatine monohydrate, not very soluble? Thanks. So it might impact how much you have to stir it, but I don't think it would be more effective gram for gram, but I'm not 100% sure on this. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure the Real Science Athletics is fine. You know, Sean puts out really, really good stuff. I've used, actually his pre-workout is, the camera stand is resting on his pre-workout. I can't show you it, otherwise the camera would fucking fall over. But I've used his stuff, and yeah, I'm really happy with it. I'll put it on something else. Yeah. All right, next question. From all the people you have helped start to make progress, what is the most common problem you see with people who plateau early but are seemingly doing everything right? So I like how you use the word seemingly, because if someone was doing everything right, they would be making progress. So I would say diet is a big one, especially getting in calories. Sleep, also a big one. Technique, huge one. Insufficient volume usually isn't it. In fact, often it's too much volume, and I actually have to slash a bunch from their program and have them focus more on quality and proximity to failure and good quality reps and technique, etc. Often it's proximity to failure and just overall effort. And so it could be any number of things. And often it's multiple things, right? People think they're doing really, really well. And then you look over the questionnaire and you're like, nope, 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 nope. And they're like, oh, And that's actually a good thing, right? Like if I got someone's questionnaire back and they actually are doing everything right, well, then they have less room for improvement, right? So I actually want to see them fucking up more so that we can correct those mistakes and see even better progress. All right, next one from TransformX. When you experienced a huge influx of new viewers, what was your mindset? Were you thinking about how to capitalize on this opportunity and make it last? Or were you just focusing on continuing what you were doing? So I never really experienced a huge influx of new viewers. I mean, obviously growth of the channel has been very good, but it hasn't been all at once. If you look at my growth, it's been slightly linear, but also slightly going up over time. So it's been like mildly exponential, but it hasn't been explosive, right? Like it's been more or less fairly steady. Like the YouTuber Natty Life commented earlier, his rise has been very, very, very fast. I think he went from, I looked on Social Blade just now, I think he went from 2K to 50K in a little over a week. So that is like, and that's one of the tough things about YouTube, where you see exactly how you're doing and you also see exactly how everyone else is doing, right? And so I think it is easy to compromise on the content that you want to make in order just to get more views. And I'm not saying Natty Life has done that, but there are certainly other YouTubers who I see are chasing views. And he puts out great content. So it's not like hard to swallow or like, oh, this guy, he doesn't deserve it. No, he absolutely does, and it's great to see. But I have noticed other people, they do get salty when they see that, right? Like they see someone overtake them, and I'll admit there's a little sliver of me where it's like, right? But I think you have to know that everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different. And, if someone is putting out good content, you just have to, just be genuinely happy for them. And I think that's the way to go. And so in terms of like capitalizing, I want to make this my full-time job, and it is. So I have to make money doing it. It's just finding a balance, and I haven't done any sponsorships, even if I've had hundreds of opportunities. Dozens of supplement, maybe not dozens of supplement companies, 6 or 7 supplement companies reach out to me, apparel company, like lots and lots of opportunities, but none of them really seemed like the right fit for the channel. So I want to make sure that I treat my audience well, and they've treated me as well with supporting with the books and everything. So yeah, it's really about finding the balance and making sure everything is sustainable and just doing the right thing. Next question, how do you feel about the 15 to 20 rep ranges for exercises other than squats and deadlifts? I feel it's easiest to add reps and see progress in that rep range. I mean, I feel like if you're making progress and that's where you can progress easiest and fastest, yeah, go for it. But that's probably not going to be my go-to, especially for compounds, for most people. Isolations, I think that's, quite good. You can also do 10 to 15, but something like a split squat, 20 reps, or barbell bench press, barbell bench press, I think probably 15 to 20 is a little bit high. But again, if you're making progress, that kind of trumps everything else. Next question, what did you do to rehab your QL? And what movements could you do to keep training legs? Okay, so to rehab it, the number one thing has been being more patient and not pissing it off. I've re-injured it 10 times, 11 times, 9 times, something like that, on 9 or 10 different movements. So a lot of it has been just not rushing into things, right? Because when you feel like it's 100%, it's not 100%. It's like 60%. And actually, I had a podcast with Alexander Bromley a while ago, like I want to say March or maybe April, and he said that he had it before and it took him 8 months to recover. And I was like, oh, 8 months, god damn. It won't take me that long, but yeah, it took me about that long, and it's I don't feel it anymore, but I do still feel the imbalances that likely contributed to it, and those are very, very difficult to fix, if they'll even be able to be fixed. And what movements I use, ironically, actually, this has been a fantastic year of leg training. I've done a lot of back extensions to train the hamstrings, hamstring curls of all different types, Nordics, seated hamstrings, lying hamstrings, standing hamstrings, lots of hamstring curls, and actually they've beefed up quite a bit, so that's nice. Adductor machine, that has been able to keep a lot of adductor size, and then quads, Smith machine hack squats have taken enough stress off the lower back that I can really work the quads. Ironically, even better than barbell back squats. So it's like, oh man, I can't do the barbell back squat. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna lose all my gains. Actually, it was the best year of quad training that I've had ever. So, maybe since the first year of training. So, machine squats have also been really, really good. Keeping quite strict form. And it's really made me reassess even how I squatted. So if I look back at old videos, I was squatting sometimes the same weight, but I was doing it in such a way that was less quads. So right now I'm quite mindful in terms of breathing and bracing and positioning, but also in terms of keeping the tension where I actually want it and being more strict with things in terms of my setup and in terms of visualizations and in terms of just putting that stress where it should be. In terms of like rehab movements, I've done, some side bends. I've done the back extension side bends. A lot of it is the breathing and bracing, and then just being strict with positioning, especially on deadlifts and other hinges. And so it sucked a lot. I could barely walk afterwards for a few weeks. I could, but I had to stay very braced. I had to be very mindful of how I moved. Waking up in the morning, I couldn't get out of bed the way I wanted to. Even now, I'm still compensating by, like when I bend down to pick something up, I put my hand on my knee. I didn't used to do that. And it's changed even other habits that I'm only now noticing now that I don't need to do them anymore. Next one, do you think it's possible someone could make better gains 1 RIR compared to 0 RIR, assuming that recovery is optimized and the set quality is the same? So I think it's important to be unemotional when it comes to training to failure, reps in reserve, RPE, etc. And that's something that can be hard to do, right? Because in some ways I'm known as like the guy who trains hard, the training to failure guy, or even sometimes the volume guy when they look at my Instagram stories. But I think it's important to realize the minute you become that guy, it's hard to actually make changes. And so I would say it is possible to make better gains at 1 RIR compared to 0 RIR if you just think about it in terms of training stress. Where are you on that curve? That curve of too much training stress, not enough training stress, the perfect amount of training stress, which it's hard to sometimes tell where exactly you are. It might not even be an exact curve. It might just like have a little plateau in the middle where it's basically equal. It might be steeper at one end where you do a little bit too much and suddenly things go to shit. But if you're doing, let's say you're doing 10 sets at 0 RIR, but it's too much. If you go back down to 1 RIR, that might be better because it's less training stress, which might be perfect. Or 0 RIR might be better. It just depends where exactly you are on that curve. So it is absolutely, hypothetically, theoretically possible that one RIR could be better, or it could be worse. You just don't know. All right, next question. People asking for advice and how to not discourage them. This is kind of a balance, because you can't be like, oh yeah, start lifting, and in a week you'll look like me, like buy my training plan, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, you can't be like, it's going to take 5 years before you look impressive, right? And a lot of people don't really want to go through that. I try to tell the truth as much as possible. I think it's better to err towards that side of things. But for some people, you tell them the truth and they're like, wow, fuck that. I'm not doing that. That sounds tough, right? And so if you know the person, you can probably lead them on with exactly what would be good for them. I'm not saying like to lie to them, but you can, if you know them, you can probably say what is going to bring the best result. And it's almost like a hypothetical situation. What is more important, the greater good or telling the truth? Because sometimes there's a little bit of wiggle room there, and you kind of have to make the decision. Because sometimes you tell people the truth, and they're just like, nah, fuck this, I'm out. All right, next question. Now that you've written a book for beginners, a book about rings, and a book for intermediates, is your next step a book for advanced athletes, or do you have some other ideas for your fourth book? I like this question. Capitalism! So actually, I would say that Resurrecting Your Gains is also for advanced athletes, in as far as I don't think I could write a book that is more advanced than that. That might change. Maybe in a few years, when I'm even more advanced and I've figured even more shit out, I could write a book for advanced athletes. But in my mind, I am early advanced. So I'm not really going to write a book for advanced when I've just become advanced, right? So it's something that if I write a book for advanced, it's super tough to write for advanced people because they already know what fucking works for them a lot of the time. And it's going to be very, very specific with what works for them. And so it's tough to write a very general book, and books are general by definition for advanced peoples. So that's tough, and I don't think I would write a book for advanced lifters. Furthermore, this is just from a business perspective, how many people watching my videos or who might buy the book are advanced? Not that many. And writing a book takes a shitload of time and effort. A lot of time and effort, especially if I decide to record an audiobook for free again. So I don't think I would write a book for advanced lifters specifically. It just doesn't really make sense, and I'm not even sure if I could do it. Next book would be Weak Point Correction, which I have a lot of thoughts about. A book on nutrition, which is a big, big project. And then maybe I have some other small ideas, but it would probably be one of those two next. Most likely nutrition, just to break up training book, etc. So next would be nutrition. But again, books take a whole bunch of time, especially I'm still doing everything on my own with YouTube and coaching, etc. And so that would probably be summer this year to maybe fall, August of this year. Realistically, probably about a year from now. Any advice on how to still get in the gym when one has a busy schedule and not slack on your goals? So the word slack, it makes it seem like you could go, but you're just not, right? Because busy and lazy, two slightly different things. And I'm not calling you lazy, but you did use the word slack, okay? So you kind of called yourself out a little bit on this one, all right? So be honest with yourself. Are you busy or are you lazy, right? And in my first book, I have a busy man's plan and a lazy man's plan. Two slightly different things. So, are you actually busy? A lot of people claim to be busy, and then they're not actually that busy. And I've definitely done this before, like, oh yeah, I'm so busy, like, oh god. But then you look at the day and you're not actually doing stuff a large portion of the day. I don't work as hard as I used to. I used to work genuinely, feverishly 14, 15 hours a day. And that's not including time in the gym. Just writing all freaking day. So I work less than I used to, and so I would assess if you're actually busy or if you're just slacking. There's nothing wrong with taking a minimalistic approach. You can do lower volume, but closer proximity to failure. And there's almost always a way to still make progress, and lower volume is absolutely viable. Also, your name is Papa Squat. I just noticed that. Great name. But keep in mind that squats often take a long time to warm up. And so if you're just interested in hypertrophy and you're super busy, you might just do a hack squat instead, or leg press instead. If you can cut your warm-up time in half, or sometimes even less, that might be a significant amount of difference, and it could allow you to do more working sets, or to progress faster, or just to get done with the workout a little bit faster. Someone who spent most of their life overweight/obese before starting training, what body fat percentage do you think they should reach before they can increase their caloric intake to focus more on building muscle instead of fat loss?
17.
17.
17?
17.
17.
17. You ready?
No, it's going to be individual. I tend to try to get people as low as possible without it being overly shitty. Okay, so there's always going to be a time in a diet when you get lean enough where you're tired, you're cranky, you're moody, you're not recovering as well, you're starting to get signs of diet fatigue, etc. Sometimes you can take a diet break and then you keep going. Sometimes you can bring calories up a little bit. Sometimes you can modify the training. Sometimes it's sleep, etc. But generally speaking, there's always going to be a wall. And if you've been overweight or obese before, often that wall is a little bit higher than other people. So if someone has always been 12 to 15% body fat, their wall might be 10%. For you, if you spent a lot of time at 25, 30, 35, 40% body fat, your wall might be 22%, might be 20%, might be 18%, right? And maybe you can try to shift that wall slightly, but in my experience, it doesn't change that much. And so find out where that wall is, push towards it, and then once you find it, maybe try to play with it a little bit. But if you notice that consistently you can't get over a certain body fat percentage without feeling like hot garbage, that's probably just where things are going to end up every single cut. And so now you can use a window above that in order to play around with bulking and cutting. And sometimes some coaches will say, like, oh, this is the plan that gets you shredded. Drink sparkling water, drink Americanos in the morning. That'll get you to 8% body fat. It probably fucking won't, right? Like, realistically speaking, it's very easy to promise. And you might find that one client in 100 who used to be obese and now they can get absolutely shredded. But in my experience, it just doesn't happen very often. And it's probably not worth killing yourself to get shredded, because often you go way back in the other direction and it's not a good overall situation. So you want to find something that is sustainable. Find your lowest point where life doesn't feel like shit, and then you can play around with bulking and cutting and gaining in a window maybe 5 to 6% above that. Not fitness related, but here's my question. What's the one question you'd like to be asked but never are? Congratulations on your success. It's almost as deserved as Mike O'Hearn's natty card. I'll take it. Yeah, fair enough. What's the one question you'd like to be asked but never are? Probably, what's the one question you'd like to be asked but never are? So I think I've answered upwards of 1,000 questions on Q&As. My previous Q&As were like 100 questions or more. So I might be inching towards 1,000 questions answered. So it's sort of tough to say because I've answered a pretty wide variety. I would say more non-fitness, non-training ones would be cool. Just because I think sometimes, there's a lot to talk about in terms of training, right? When someone's like, what happens when you run out of videos to make? Shit, that's going to be in many, many years. There's so much stuff to talk about in terms of training alone, and then you throw in diet, nutrition, and current events, and all kinds of stuff. It's literally never-ending video topics. So I would say, more non-training related stuff would be interesting. But I also don't want to stray too far away from fitness as well. So it's sort of tough to find the balance because it's easy to lose your audience by going away from fitness when fitness, specifically muscle growth, is the whole reason that a lot of people subscribed. What exercise do you enjoy most, not because of what it targets or what its value is, but just the enjoyment of performing it? I really like deadlifting. I wrote a core answer probably 3 or 4 years ago. 3 years ago, maybe. Deficit deadlifts, freaking love them. Fantastic. Just a huge range of motion, a lot of tension, heavy. Trouble is, if you take a whole shitload of sets of deficit deadlifts to failure, well, it's tough on the body. I actually like explosive movements, even though I'm not particularly explosive. So stuff like low hang pulls, high pulls. I actually like upright rows that have been growing on me. I don't particularly like curls or extensions or a lot of isolation movements. I do them anyway because they're good for growth, but they're not something that I super particularly look forward to. I like pulling movements. Heyo, rows, vertical pulls. I don't really like pull-ups. I like dips. There's a lot of movements that I like. A lot of movements that I tolerate. Some that I don't like, but I do anyway. But honestly, I find that I don't do that many movements that I don't like anymore because it's just not really worth doing. All right, that is all for this Q&A. I hope you liked it. And if you want to support the channel, definitely check out copies of my books. They will help you a lot in your fitness journey. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.